welcome back to the show. I am so excited. I know I say this all the time. I'm so excited about my guest, but I am so excited about my guest today because you all, like, this lady is literally a rock star in health and wellness and so many other things. In politics, you're amazing. In Christ following everything. And you might know her husband, but literally Shemane Nugent, you have been into healthy living for like before healthy living was cool, right? So our whole philosophy here is to make healthy living simple. So welcome. And I know you've had a whole lot of stuff recently, like you just had a documentary that came out.
Yep.
So I want to talk about that, but I want to hear your story. Like, I want to know how you got involved into so much of this. You used to teach exercise classes in Jackson, Michigan here, right?
Yes, I had my own aerobic studio in Jackson. I have been teaching group fitness classes since 1980. When I was at Central Michigan University, we would just get a boom box in the girls' dorm and go down into cafeteria at night and do leg lifts and things like that, old-fashioned calisthenics.
Love it.
That morphed into me becoming a fitness instructor, and I just loved it. And I realized it was a great way for me to get in shape and stay in shape and also share my passion for healthy living with others. And I met and married Ted, and I wanted to continue that. So I opened up a studio and I just loved it. I was teaching 12 to 15 high intensity classes before we knew that 45 minutes of cans was not good for you.
Right.
I was doing that. And I was teaching spinning. I trained with Johnny G, who created spinning. I did all kinds of classes, everything: step, spinning, slide, kickboxing, meditation, stretching, everything, and body pump. And then our house that was in Jackson, Michigan, was once featured on MTV Cribs, was actually killing us. And we found out that it was due to toxic mold that was growing between the walls. We never saw anything. We just kept getting sicker and sicker. And this was back in the year, started happening around 2001. And I had gotten debilitating migraines to the point where Ted would have to rush me to the hospital. I even thought I was having a heart attack. He'd rush me to the hospital. I'd get sent home. I visited a very well-known headache doctor in the Ann Arbor area. And I was given so many prescription drugs. I can't believe that I made it through all that. But ultimately, I had to become my own investigative sleuth because nobody could help me. Back then, nobody was talking about toxic mold. And when I discovered that it actually was the house that was killing us, we made the decision to walk away from our dream house and demolish it. And we ended up moving to Texas.
Wow. So then explain to everybody, especially, did you have black mold, I'm assuming then out of that? Right. And so now we understand, like, so often people will go through that whole mold testing. They find something, they think they can just take care of it themselves. They think they can throw bleach on it. They think right. And it only creates more of an issue. So literally what you just said, like, you guys demolished that house and walked away.
The problem was and is that one mold spore is 1/100th the size of human hair, and its natural defense mechanism is to propagate a million times like a dead dandelion. So at that time, we had gotten our house tested 3 times and it came back negative. But remember, nobody was talking about mold back in 2000, 2001, and 2. And they just told me, maybe you're overstressed. Which of course is true. But I do believe the human body functions at a high rate of, there are people like us, people like you, who want to learn and do and keep going all day long. And as a fitness instructor, I didn't have time to have downtime. So we ended up going to a toxicologist in Royal Oak, Michigan, who was treating a lot of the people who came back from 9/11, they were helping in New York City, and they came back with all these illnesses that nobody could understand why and what was causing them. And he discovered that both Ted and I had 4 different types of mold in our bloodstream, including Stachybotrys, which is what most people call black mold. But here's the thing, there's 1,000 different types of mold. Mold grows outdoors. Mold is on cheese. It should not be in your house. And what happened was, since nobody knew how to remediate it back then, it got into our air duct system and it got everywhere. It got on all of our clothes. It got to the point where I was also diagnosed with having pre-emphysema, and I don't smoke. I couldn't walk up a flight of stairs if my life depended on it. So we had no choice.
Mm-hmm. So then how did you go through the treatments of it then?
Well, I had a choice.
Mm-hmm.
I could go to someplace like the Mayo Clinic that would continue to cover my symptoms
Absolutely.
with more drugs, or I can basically detoxify my body.
Mm.
And I found a place, thanks to my attorney who works out of in Michigan still. His sister has been my best friend since 8th grade. And he represented an entire community in Michigan, which all of the homes had toxic mold. And what happened was he ended up becoming, a health advocate for them because they couldn't show up for depositions. They were so sick. And he introduced me to the Environmental Health Center in Dallas and Dr. Ray. And I literally jumped ship, went there. I did infrared saunas, vitamin IV, oxygen. I did a specific rotation diet, skin brushing. I mean, you name it. I was doing this 20 years ago.
Yeah, that's huge because those are all things that we all do now. Right. And it was, it's even, I even had a whole, I do my own labs. Right. And had a whole situation that came back and I was like, wait a minute, where is this coming from? And so even prior exposure, what I realized, cause I was out in Iowa for grad school in that time period, 99 to 2003. And we always complained about the one room that we all had class in. And literally this was still showing up in my system 20 some years later. So it is. So I totally understand 100% with that, but people, I see, unfortunately, within a chiropractic office, we have people that have tried everything. Like you had just said, you walked over to Ann Arbor, not walked, but went into Ann Arbor and they're going to give you meds. It's just how it goes over there. And so we cover up these symptoms one after another. And then our body's finally like, I can't give you any more symptoms. Like the body's breaking down at this point.
And the other problem is, we learn so much about mold and it's constantly evolving. I wish I would have known what I know now back then, but I guess there's a reason for it because I did make the documentary, which I'll talk to you about in a minute. But the mold mycotoxin is very similar to the Lyme spirochete in that it can lay dormant in your organs for months or even years. And then let's say you have let's go back to the dandelion. You have the dead dandelion and the wind blows and all the dandelion spores go everywhere. That's what happens to the mold mycotoxin that's laying dormant in your organ. Pick an organ, it can go there. And if you have, let's say, a car accident or some any emotional or physical trauma, or you get re-exposed, or what happened to us is we have multiple chemical sensitivity. So it's like I'm always just trying to keep my head above water. So what happens is that, I have some good days, months, weeks, years, only to get set back by, getting on a plane, smelling that jet fuel and going, I feel like I hit a brick wall. But now the difference is I recognize it and I know what to do.
Yes, exactly. How about even I would assume all of the toxic cleaning products and the Febreze, the cleaning candle or candles and all that stuff too would probably trigger as well. Even the cigarette smoke. I think of that classic for people full of candida always have issues with cigarette smoke.
People don't realize that, when you talk about the new car smell, there are still some people who think that that's great. No, it's actually chemicals in the leather off-gassing. And one other thing, I need to fill up my water glass, but I drink out of water. There are some times when I travel, I got to have a plastic water bottle, but this is one thing that Dr. Ray taught me is that, especially in Texas or in the, those 90-degree days in Michigan summers, those are hot. So if you have plastic water bottles or Gatorade or sodas, whatever, sitting outside cooking in the heat, what happens is the chemicals in that plastic will leach into the liquid and you're drinking that. So it's a constant, you have to be vigilant. And again, I'm not perfect. I travel and there's some times where I have to have, fast food or Coke or something like that. I try to, live in moderation. But when I was getting healthy, I eliminated every potential trigger. I was like do you ever remember the Seinfeld show with the bubble boy?
Yes.
I was the bubble girl.
You. I know.
I was a bubble girl.
And I was the same way, for I guess I'll talk about my gut health. I was the one growing up as a kid that always had, like, I felt horrible after eating. And I just assumed as a child, it was normal, right? Like I was like, oh, everybody feels bad. And then it was finally when I went away to college that I realized my roommates weren't that way. And then when I went to chiropractic school, I'm like, okay, cool. I'll figure this out. It must be enzymes. It must be, and I just continued going on. And then it was early 2000s. So about the same time, I'm like, oh, this is gluten, before anybody, knew what gluten issues were. But it's those things that, I mean, I would travel every weekend and I wouldn't eat because it was, and we understand like fasting can be beneficial, but when you're doing it all the time, it really wrecks the body. Right.
Yeah.
So,
That's
but
how
we learn from our experiences.
that's how my son is and was growing up. Mold can affect everybody differently. You can be in the same home and people, Ted didn't have migraines, he had headaches, but we all of us, Ted and I and our son Rocco, we all had chronic fatigue. But one of the things that Rocco had was debilitating digestive problems.
Wow.
Where to the point, so I understand that, like, he would just be in so much pain after he ate, and got to the point where, as a growing boy, you got to eat. We tried everything. We tried eliminating dairy. He ended up now, I don't know if you know this, my husband and I are both hunters.
Yes.
Our son is vegan. And you know what? It's awesome. What you got to find out what
works best for you. Yeah.
And God bless you.
Wow. How did he figure, like, how did he end up going that way? Like,
he tried everything.
Process of elimination.
It worked for him. And he also became a yoga instructor. And,
That's great.
Again, he's now 31. You've got to find out whatever works for you. But here's the other thing. We are constantly changing because of our environment, because of our heredity. We can thank our parents for, different predispositions to different illnesses. And, the toxins and chemicals and scent, like you talked about, Febreze. I went grocery shopping the other day and Ted said, can you get some trash bags? I'm like, no, I can't, because they all have Febreze in them. It's unbelievable. They put Febreze in Kleenex. And every time I go someplace where they have scented candles or the plug-ins, I pull them out. Or I ask them, if I'm going to come here. Yeah. In fact, there was a chiropractor I went to in Florida. I walked in the door. It was like, Spice World USA candles everywhere. And I went, oh, I was shocked because it was a chiropractor. And I said, I'm very sensitive. I was trying to be nice. I said, I'm allergic to that. Is there any way you can blow out the candles? I'll wait a minute and then I'll come back in. And they actually said, no, this is my sister's candle business, and we like to advertise for her. And I said, well, I'm sorry, I guess I can't come here then. You've got to advocate for yourself.
100%. We have those signs up in our practice where, people don't understand that scents can trigger migraines. They can trigger breathing issues. I think people realize that. And so we have the signs up in the practice, but people they don't understand, like, they feel that their perfume or their cologne is not offensive. And so I've literally had to lock a patient in an x-ray room to clear out my office. We had, again, 40 below zero days in Michigan in January, opening up the windows, trying to clear out somebody's perfume one day. So I didn't have to call the ambulance on somebody. So, when you share those stories, you're like, wow, I had no idea. And I'm like, they're truly chemical sensitivities, but it's also what it's doing to the body it's so estrogenic. And plus it's so toxic. And so, do you ever use EWG, the database there, the Skin Deep database, and like type in and check out all your chemicals? Same.
Yeah. And people don't realize how critical that is. I find that the people who don't realize that, one time Ted and I in Michigan, we went over to another family's farm that had asked us to come and go hunting there. And they opened the door and we could smell the Downy fabric softener and the scented candles and everything. We went, I'm sorry, we can't come in there. And people, I think their toxic load is so high, they don't get it anymore. They don't smell. But when you get descented, so to speak, detoxified, when I went to the environmental health center and I stayed there for 3.5 weeks, I could tell, I could be in the grocery store and I could walk down an aisle and tell if they had Downy fabric softener, if they wore perfume and what kind of perfume that was. Even leather products, you get it's like a dog, you get a greater sense of smell.
It is. And it's also, I think, even just when we start cleaning up our diets too, right? I see that all the time with patients where we'll go through and just eliminate processed foods. Eliminate sugar is a huge thing for our practice members. And people will literally come in and say, I can taste the sweetness of a carrot. I had no idea that carrots are sweet. And I'm like, this is what's so beautiful, right? Like you start adding the good things in and your body craves better things, but then you can really taste the flavor of your food.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So let's talk about hunting, because I know, like, obviously you guys are like ultimately grass-fed animals and everything if you're hunting your own meat at this point. Are you hunting on your own property, I'm assuming?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like people have asked us to come hunt. Especially with the pandemic and the lockdowns, I've never been prouder to be a hunter. You know, in the past, I would post a photo of me with a Michigan buck and my bow and arrow. I hunt with a bow and arrow, and I would get some hate mail and things like that. And I thought, I'm just not going to do it anymore. Now I've never been more proud, because if something happens, and the state of the world these days, who knows what's going to happen? We're not concerned about where our food source is coming from. I even have a garden, an indoor and outdoor garden. The indoor is not so great right now. And the outdoor we're going through a little bit of an ice storm right now, but we're not worried about where our sustenance is coming from. And I think that's so important. So now more than ever, I'm proud to be a hunter.
Yeah. How do the bucks compare in Texas versus Michigan, out of curiosity? I know we got some pretty big ones up here. I mean, they're all corn-fed though.
The bodies are much bigger in Michigan. I think they've got to be more fortified. It's like, and then the Florida deer are very tiny, compared to Michigan deer. But we have, this is Ted's full-time job when he's not touring, is every day he's out there. Do you know it's the movie, The Wedding Crashers with
that's
Will
one of my
Ferrell.
favorite movies.
and Will Ferrell goes, Ma, the meatloaf, Ma. And he goes, I don't even know what she does back there all day. Well, I don't know what Ted does outdoors all day, but he's out there and he's fixing fences, and we've got a few hundred acres fenced in, and we've got whitetail deer, fallow deer, scimitar horn oryx, black buck antelope, oudad, and it's like a little Africa. It's pretty cool. So it keeps them busy.
I love it. How did you and Ted meet? Do you mind if I ask?
No, not at all. I was a traffic reporter at a rock and roll radio station in Detroit called Wheels, WLLZ. And I graduated from Wayne State University with a degree in radio, TV, and film. And my goal was to be the next, I don't know, Diane Sawyer or something, get into newscasting. And a step there was getting into radio broadcasting. So I worked for Metro Traffic Control, which provided different traffic updates to different radio stations in Detroit. And Wheels found out about me, hired me to be full-time for their morning crew. And one day, October 3rd, 1988, Ted came in and filled in for the morning crew for an entire week. So every day we worked together. I didn't know, I'm not a rock and roll fan. I didn't know anything. My brother knew who he was, but I couldn't have told you one of his songs if my life depended on it. But when you're talking with people, you get to know a lot about them. He didn't drink or smoke, which I thought, wow, you're going to the rock and roll industry to find somebody that doesn't drink and smoke. That's odd. And he was just funny and charismatic. And we dated a few times. Our first date was November 7th, 1988. We got engaged a month later and married a month after that.
Wow.
I know.
That's awesome. See, like you give me hope on things like this. Like this is, again, this is the worst.
You just never know. Like he is the last person in the world. Like, I'm sure my high school friends, when I was, put it this way. I graduated from Utica Eisenhower.
Yeah.
My senior class song was Come Sail Away by Styx. And I thought that was too hard rock.
So funny. I don't even know if I should say this on the record. I will. So I told you I grew up in the Irish Hills, and you can tell Ted this too. This is funny. So we were the Onstead Wildcats. And so this is the mid 90s, but the song they would always play was Cat Scratch Fever. Right. So everybody did that. And then as an adult, I was like, oh my. I don't know.
It makes sense. I mean, the things we used to do. Yeah.
Right.
It's crazy.
So
but it's great. And we love Michigan. We love our fellow Michiganders. It feels like, even though we live full time in Texas, we spend about 5 months a year in Michigan still. So we're there often. We love it. Politics, not so much, but that's another topic for another podcast.
Another time. I know. I see. That's the whole thing. I always feel like, because we were, one of the, you know this because you probably still have friends up here. We were such a strict lockdown state.
Yeah.
And I just remember I talked to one of my friends and I was like, I can't do this anymore. He was another business owner. And especially where I am located. I mean, even now we still have masked up people. I still get complaints that people are not masked when they're leaving their car to walk up, just all of this stuff. It's
still, you do?
Yeah, still. But one of my friends is like, well, just time out. Just, like if this happened 2 years prior, it would have been different. And I was like, it is, it's amazing how things do change that fast in the state. But anyways, there's so much we could talk about with that. So let's hear about your documentary. I know this is a huge thing because especially, so if, anybody, ladies, men, if you're listening and you're dealing with brain fog, if you're dealing with all these unexplained symptoms, headaches, like Shemane had just said, one of those things that I think we're seeing it more often now that people, functional practitioners, will say it that way, functional health practitioners, your traditional medical models, not going to look at this and they're probably going to tell you that you're nuts. But it's something to look for because it's a real thing. It's not just found in quote unquote moldy states. It's anywhere where there's water, like where it rains, where there could be a water leak. There could be all sorts of stuff. And like you said, yours was hidden. You didn't even realize it was happening.
We had no idea. And you're right. It doesn't matter if you're in a humid climate or a dry climate. We're talking about the air quality inside your home between the walls. Of course, it's better to keep the humidity down. But if you have a water leak, you've got a porous substance like sheetrock or drywall, and you've got a lack of ventilation, you will have mold. You will have deadly toxic Stachybotrys black mold within 72 hours. So that's why I did this documentary. I want to get my story out there. I felt like God was just nudging me, like every single day. If I do something on social media, people ask me, I feel like I'm dying. Can you call me? Can you help me? What do I do? So I did this documentary, produced a documentary with telling my story and the illnesses that Ted and I and our son Rocco got. And then I'm also writing a book about this. So it's not like I wanted to be known as the mold lady, but it's okay because I feel like God is using me. And if this can help people, then I'm all for that.
I love it. And I love when you're following your purpose in life, right? Like when we figure out what that purpose is. And, I've always said like God put me on this earth to be a chiropractor. And it's just not just to get rid of pain, but it's to bring about vibrant, healthy lives, right? Whoever thought this podcast was going to be, and we cover all the topics.
Well, that's awesome. And good for you. Kudos to you for doing it, for following your dream and for helping people, because when I get to Michigan, I'm going to come to visit you because I go to a chiropractor often. And I know that it's a make or break deal. Like there are times when I actually have slight scoliosis. And if I don't exercise every day, it's to some extent, it could be stretching. I'm not talking about running a marathon, especially at my age. I'm going to be 60 this year. But
you look amazing for 60. Look at this is healthy living, folks.
If I don't do something, my back just freezes and I cannot move. So chiropractic care is very important. I'm a huge advocate.
I love it. That's what I've been under chiropractic care since the day I was born. Right. And people are always like, why did your parents take you to a chiropractor? Like, did you have back pain as an infant? And I'm like, no, I have a brain and a spinal cord, and we wanted that to be healthy. My grandmother, this is, in case the audience doesn't know, my grandmother was pregnant with my dad. So 1951. And they told my grandfather to take good care of her because she wouldn't make it out of the pregnancy alive because of a heart condition. And so she saw a chiropractor because, and was fine. And so what's amazing, you talk about a scoliosis. So at her funeral, she lived to be 92. At her funeral, my dad and I were looking at all of her pictures, and like as a little girl and growing up through her teenage years, she's sitting there with, you could tell massive scoliosis, like, shoulders were really crooked, et cetera. And I then started scrolling through the pictures, trying to find one post after my dad was born. And here she is, she's level. And I was like, look at the power of chiropractic, Dad. Like here, you can tell her posture was off. After you were born, she had obviously been seeing a chiropractor. My aunt walks up and she's like, oh, you didn't know she was like ran over by a car as a kid. So I'm sitting here thinking like in the 20s being ran over by whatever. It's like, well, no wonder she never shared that, but it is. And so people oftentimes say like, how does chiropractic help a heart condition? It's the fact of literally just allowing those nerves to send the right signals to those organs. For her, it wasn't being sent to the heart properly. So
Mm.
yeah, it is. I hear you with scoliosis and all of that.
Do you find a question for you,
Yeah.
although this is your
Yeah.
podcast,
No.
do you find that you're seeing more problems with teenagers or millennials, young people,
Yes.
because of doing this?
Yep.
Like, that just hurt
100%.
my neck right there.
I know. See, and that's what I just told, I had a patient ask me the other day. He's like, well, how long can I actually, because I do upper cervical care. So I'm working with the Atlas and realigning the whole body. So I had a patient say, well, how long can I actually hold my alignment? And I told him, I said, I opened up this practice in 2005. People literally held for like 2 to 3 months at a time. I'm like, that was prior to the iPhone. And he's like, well, why did the iPhone? Like, he was iPhone versus Android. I'm like, no. It was prior to us looking down all the time. You know, we have a 12-pound head. This top bone is 2 ounces. And so for every inch we go forward, it's an extra 10 pounds of force into that lower neck. And so what I see, and everybody now, like everyone post-COVID, even because they're not COVID as in the disease, but actually after the lockdowns, everybody has been locked inside. They've been on their phones. They're working from home. Their posture is horrific. But what you just said for this younger generation, you know, if you go back, everybody can pretty much feel there's a little bump at the base of their neck. That's C7, T1, like that goes to the thyroid. So if that's off, right, we don't want that one off, but it also goes into your hands. I am seeing a secondary bump in the middle back on younger people because they're so hunchy, right? And then not only, if you think of it, they're compressing their lungs so they can't get the air in, but now those are the nerves to the lungs, the stomach, the heart, like all the really important organs through there. So there's so much. I am working all the time on restoring the curves in the neck, trying just to correct our posture. So you're absolutely right on that.
Now I'm like, okay, I got to sit up straight now. I
gotta... I just saw my chiropractor yesterday. I feel amazing. Good. So what type of diet do you guys typically follow? Are you just, obviously Whole Foods with
I'm mostly keto.
I love
it. In the documentary, one of my interviews is with Dr. David Perlmutter, who wrote the book called Grain Brain. He happened to be my neurologist at the time.
Oh my goodness.
I lucked out with that. So he's in my documentary. For anybody who wants to see it, it's at KILERHOUSE.org. You can watch it online. But one of the things that he told me, because I had been going to him for migraines even after we got out of the house, moved to Texas, and I came to see him. This is the funniest thing. Not funny, but insightful. So he had done a gluten test on me, gluten sensitivity test, because his book is all about, and I don't know if you know his story. Yeah. He writes about it in the book that he is trying to get all of his patients off of gluten. And what he told me is, even though you're not sensitive, I don't want you eating it. So, right. But one of the things that he told me when I came in for, I was getting migraines again, which they kind of went away for a while and then came back. And he was in Florida, and I have another home. I call it a she shed in Florida. And I was there, and I'm like, when I'm in Texas, I get more headaches. And I said, maybe it's because we are surrounded by cedar trees, and the cedar pollen is unbelievable. You can see it like clouds. But anyways, he said, I literally walked in the office, sat down, and he goes, what do you hear about? And I told him, and I said, I'm getting migraines again. He goes, well, did you have a leak in your Texas house? And I said, yeah, our hot water heater burst, but I know how to fix it. We got somebody there. We remediated it right away. This was after the KILER House in Michigan. Yeah. And all he said was, I bet you missed a spot. Oh, that's it. So sure enough, I went home, had the house tested, and our builder at the time that was remediating it, he did not replace the interior baseboard. And this all boils down to faulty building with a lot of these, what's going on with water infiltration in homes and mold and condensation. It's really a shame. It's a shame.
My parents had the same thing. They were in the Irish Hills, and their house that they're custom, wonderful designed home. Same thing with the windows. So yeah. Shemane, share with them where they can, obviously we've got KILERHOUSE.org. Was that what it was?
Yep.
Okay. share with them how else they can find you on social media and all that. I know we spoke earlier. You've been kicked off Twitter, as so many people.
Yes, I'm permanently suspended from Twitter. I'm surprised that you wanted to have me on, because I must be.
This is why I love it. And you know, and to be truthful, we haven't had any glitches with Zoom, because typically, oh, you know, Jason Dean was one of my friends and you were on his show. When I interviewed him, it just stopped and he dropped, and I'm like, Jason, I'm leaving this in so everybody can actually see what happens.
Yep. That's so funny. I've been talking with Jason a lot lately. So lots of things going on. I'm glad that you guys are friends too, because he's a great guy. So I am not on Twitter, but I am on Facebook. Look for the blue check. It's Shemane.Nugent, SHEMANE.NUGENT, blue check. And then also on Instagram, and it's just Shemane Nugent. And I do more fun things on Instagram, like dancing videos. I have a Dancing Friday video that I do, and it's easier to do reels and have fun. And Instagram allows you to use music, which it's kind of hard to dance without music on Facebook. So, you know.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for your time today. This has been wonderful. I definitely want you back. All right. So we'll have to figure out when our schedules work, and we can just be Shemane and Lisa chit chat about health.
I'd love it. And many
and
other
life.
Things too.
Yes. All right.
Thanks so much for having me.